Europe isn't giving Ukraine the consistency it needs right now. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky speaks during an EU summit this week at the European Parliament in Brussels, in Belgium. CNN, the European Union's decision to open negotiations with Ukraine to join the bloc on Thursday night is both a tangible step forward and a major symbolic moment. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky had spent the past few days telling his European counterpart how important joining the EU was to Ukraine. But the celebrations in Kiev were tempered when just hours later the EU said it had not been able to reach the agreement on sending a $55 billion tranche of new funding for Ukraine. This is for more than a fly in the ointment for Ukraine. It comes after months of fears among Ukrainian and other European officials that the West, so united in its strength for Ukraine since February 2022, had finally tired of the endless talks about helping Ukraine. Individual moments matter in diplomacy, of course, symbolic moment to mean something, and the decision to start a session talks with Ukraine will have sent a message to the Kremlin. But the context that the individual moment happens within often matters more. In the past few months, particularly since the Israel-Hamas conflict had pulled the attention from Ukraine, the sense of overall Western refugee fatigue on Ukraine has felt more acute for officials. The spot over money in the US have dovetailed with the dispute in Europe in a way that creates an overall picture of Western wariness. It in this context that Thursday's EU announcement must be seen. Yes, joining the bloc is the key priority, but the EU's complicated procedures mean it could still take over a decade and requires the war to be over in one way or another. That means wartime Ukraine will never actually benefit from EU membership, whatever the next decade holds. And given how hard it was to reach Thursday's deal, it's important to remember that throughout the whole accession process, there will be ample opportunities for member states to dig their heels in, most notably, Hungary. Any country that is currently a net recipient of EU funds will be worse off if Ukraine joins the bloc, while net contributors will see their EU membership fee go up. Europe supports Ukraine, sure, but money speaks in the EU. The EU's inability to reach the deal on funding present arguably the more immediate problem for Ukraine, as frankly Kiev needs cash to keep fighting this war. But both the announcement on money and accession reveal the biggest political problem for Ukraine in Europe: consistency. Officials all over Europe have for some time been briefing anyone who will listen that consistency is ultimately the most important thing for Ukraine right now. Ukraine needs to know when and how much money is coming on a purely practical level. On a political level, Ukraine needs to know exactly how solid support is from each major allies and where the weak links are. Kicking the financial support plan down the the road into next year doesn't mean that holdouts will suddenly change their minds. More likely, they will actually find other regions to play politics. The inconsistency of the past few months from each ally has had a negative impact on Ukraine. In a zero-sum world of geopolitics, this has equated roughly as bad for Ukraine, ergo good for Russia. The situation is not beyond repair, diplomats and officials insist, but it does require a consistency on everything from rhetoric to action. And the Thursday night positive officials say were massively outweighed by the negatives of Europe's inconsistency.